A lot of the time for these videos, I shorten the game's title to what is popularly used. Official titles can be long, clunky, and most people just call the game by whatever the big words on the title screen say. But in the case of Shin 4人 Uchi Mahjong Yakuman Tengoku, it does the game a bit of a disservice. Because even though this is just another Mahjong game, it's also the collision of multiple long-running Mahjong game series. But before I get into that, a quick introduction to Mahjong for somebody who just poked into this video randomly. Mahjong is a set-building game similar to Rummy, but it's played with a set of tiles instead of cards. In Japan, a variant called Uchi Mahjong is commonly played, and it requires that players build certain types of hands before they can go out. The highest scoring of this type of hand is referred to as Yakuman. Now, way back in 1983, one of the big system sellers in the early days of the Famicom was Mahjong. That's Nintendo's version of Mahjong, not Mahjong in general. But that game was only a 2-player variant, while Mahjong was commonly played with 4 players. And so a year later, Nintendo hired Hudson to make a sequel to Mahjong, 4人 Uchi Mahjong. It featured 4 players and was based on one of Hudson's computer versions. Meanwhile, Nintendo released an LCD handheld Mahjong game called Yakuman. That also was wildly popular. And when the Game Boy launched in 1989, one of those early titles was a Mahjong game, and Nintendo reused the title Yakuman for that. So the full title of Shin 4人 Uchi Mahjong Yakuman Tengoku brings together multiple branches of Nintendo's Mahjong family. And to make the game, Nintendo hired Chat Noir, a developer that you've almost certainly never heard of, but they specialized pretty much exclusively in Mahjong games. The cartridge itself for Yakuman Tengoku is kind of special. This is the only time that Nintendo uses the alternative Famicom cartridge housing, the oversized one that looks a lot like an NES cartridge. The reason for that oversized cartridge is that this is the only game that Nintendo published that used their MMC5 mapper chip. It required a pretty big board, and all of the games on the Famicom that used the mapper are in these oversized shells. It's also one of only 3 Famicom cartridges to have split coloring. I think they were trying to make it look a bit like a Mahjong tile. There are only 2 game modes in Yakuman Tengoku. Free mode, where you just select any opponents in the game that you want to play against, and World mode, which is the real meat of the game. In World mode, you start out with $400 to your name, and go around the world entering Mahjong tournaments. Your goal is to win all of the tournaments in the world, and if you run out of money, it's game over. There's an entry fee for every tournament, and the game saves after it pays the entry fee. So you can't just cheese your way through by hitting reset anytime you get a bad hand. Coming in first will let you profit, coming in second gets you back your entry fee, and coming in third just gives you a little bit of cash. Playing Mahjong against 4 players gets a bit cramped on a screen with this low of resolution. Chat Noir's solution to this was to let you scroll around a bit. The discards all remain on screen, but the hands themselves and anything that they've pulled from other players, you might have to scroll a bit to see what's happening. You turn on scrolling by hitting B. If a tile's been discarded that you want to pick up, you have to press down to take it. It also works for special orders in your hand, and doing this from your hand when you're 1 away from finishing will highlight tiles that you can discard to do that. A lot of personality is given to the players in Yakuman Tengoku. They are very chatty thanks to having a lot of sampled speech in the game. All of the phrases that you'd usually hear are recorded multiple times. And there's even a few different sounds for Mahjong tiles getting set down. If you throw out a tile that another player might be able to use, they stop and think for a few seconds, which also gives you some insight into what their hand is like. If you manage to win the tournament in Las Vegas, then the difficulty increases, and the tournament prize money decreases. At level 2, only the first and second players get a payout, while at level 1, only the winner. This is Nintendo's final Mahjong game on the Famicom, and it marks the end of the enormous Mahjong blitz we had in 1991. In fact, we're just about done with Mahjong on the Famicom. There's only one more Mahjong game released on the system, and it comes out almost a year after this. Nintendo isn't done with Mahjong, though it will be a long time before they return to it. The next Yakuman game comes out for the Game Boy Advance. And since then, Nintendo has continued a small but steady stream of Yakuman games. This is one of the few Famicom Mahjong games that is remembered in Japan, but mainly because it's by Nintendo. Even then, it's not a game that people go back to. My take on it is, it's fine. I appreciate the improved audio and the characters in the game, but when push comes to shove, it's still just Mahjong. And I don't even think it's one of the best Mahjong games on the Famicom.